In 1996, two video store clerks miraculously survive an unspecified cataclysm that has destroyed civilization. Great efforts are made to archive and preserve the past so that future generations can fully comprehend the magnificence that was Hulkamania, Feldman Haim, and Police Academy 3.
They took the stones from here! What's up, Dr. Jones? Oh, come on, man. Where the hell is your costume?
Yeah. This is it. This is my costume.
Oh, that's all you can... Do you have any idea the efforts, the great lengths I went through to assemble this thing here today? And you just with a little hat on.
I am dressed up, man. This is my uniform. This is what I got. I'm not even in the mood for this, but I mean, I have a hat.
Oh, you're not in the mood, are you? Well, what the hell's wrong with you? What are you watching, Kramer versus Kramer again or something?
Well, you know that what you're wearing is not regulation mega hit video uniform material regardless. I can't keep this hat on the whole show. It's not regulation uniform. Mega hit video!
Hold up a sec. Am I picking up a bit of a vibe from you today?
Yeah, I'm just a little bummed out, man. I just started thinking about Karen and, you know, the fact that ultimately she just kind of picked up and went out for a pack of smokes or just, you know, needed to clear her head, whatever she did.
Clear her head? Corey, no one clears their head in the apocalypse, man. Alright, she's not coming back. I tell you know what else? That would just be bad form, okay?
I know, but I do want you to think about this. The fact that she left the confines of this safe video store to fight everything that's going on outside leads me to believe it may have been my fault she left.
Do I look like your therapist here today? We're talking about shit movies here. We're trying to save humanity, okay? I love you, man, but we've been through this time and time again. 4 years.
Goddamn, man, you know what? Why you gotta be so real? Just so hard, man.
Well, turn me Oh, you don't want to go there. I'll give you a little bit of a hint, though. Just a little story from the pages of my life. My grandfather, God rest his ass. I'm 7. Christmas, he looks at me, he gives me a gift. Now, I don't get that very often. I open the box, there's a little puppy. I mean, I immediately bonded with that thing. And as soon as I bonded with it, in that same breath, he took it away and threw it out by the door. And I was completely shocked. And he looks into me and he says, "Don't ever get attached to anything. That's your real gift."
Oh, man, Philip. He sounded like a great man.
I don't give a care. It's just the way it is. But that's why I am who I am. Enough of this therapy nonsense here right now. Let's get hard. Let's talk exploitation.
Oh, man. You know yourself, I could sit down for hours and talk about all the subgenres of exploitation films. In fact, we probably have talked for hours in the past.
We could talk for the rest of our lives, really.
Absolutely. I could die an old man and talk about nothing else for the rest of my life other than exploitation films. But what's your favorite exploitation genre?
Just for the cheeky naughtiness of it all, I kind of like nunsploitation. But at the end of the day, when I'm going to settle down with a drink and just kind of ponder it all, probably sexploitation. I like hard bodies, the first one. I like oddballs. I like screwballs, fireballs. Pretty much anything that's Canadian that ends with balls.
So essentially what you're saying is you like anything with balls.
Yeah. Alright, I walked into that one. Speaking of a mouthful, it's kind of impossible to bring up exploitation without bringing up the Pope of Pop Cinema, and you know who I'm talking about, Roger Corman. Corman basically followed a philosophy. So if you have no budget, subterranean budget, no stars, and this wants to be, you gotta get it into the drive-in pretty quickly and make a turnaround with cash profit, follow the principle of the 3 Bs. Beasts, blood, and boobs. And if you got that, my man, you got some bucks.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I can think of Herschel Gordon Lewis, Frank Henenlotter, Russ Meyer, just the name, Sonny Chiba. I could go on for hours.
Actually, that's great. That's a great intro. For any survivors out there who may not quite understand exploitation films and where they came from, ultimately, you have it right. Yes, Roger Corman and the 3 Bs, showing you something a little more risque, looking at the aspects of a genre and just pointing out the titillating aspects at times. It kind of goes back to the 1930s when you're talking about all those anti-marijuana films and the drug panic of the 30s, leading up to the 60s and 70s. But ultimately, it all comes down to exploitation of a genre.
Yeah, not only a genre, current trends that were at the time. If anything was making money, these guys sat back and said, well, how can we do it? And how do we do it cheaper? Just like you said. So that's what they were exploiting the trend.
Absolutely. And where did these movies end up? In the grindhouses, my friend.
Yeah, tonight's movie, though, I'm not entirely sure if that's an exploitation film proper. It definitely exploited the fact, the success of Raiders of the Lost Ark onward to 1984's Temple of Doom. But other than that, is it an exploitation film? I don't know.
Philip, I actually firmly disagree with you. I think tonight's movie is a fantastic example of a subgenre of exploitation films called the mockbuster. You know, carbon copy script taken from the movies that it's actually kind of lampooning in a way and giving you something that represents the blockbuster that you grew up with, but it ain't quite that.
They're fake. They're bogus.
Okay, you know what? I won't disagree with that.
All right. So don't disagree with that, my friend. I want you to look at me and let's call this movie what it really is. The finest example of Joe-exploitation in the history of the world.
That is awesome. Joe-exploitation, perfect. Okay, so tonight's film, without further ado, let's explore King Solomon's Mines from 1985. Let's let the survivors decide.
At the brink of civilization lies a hostile jungle, guarded by cannibals, cursed by the gods. Inside, a forbidden treasure waits for one man tough enough to take it.
Quartermain!
I've got it! Richard Chamberlain is Alan Quartermain in King Solomon's Mines. Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, November 22nd at a theater near you.
Maybe it's not the best movie ever, but man, it makes me excited. I actually remember liking this movie quite a bit. I was 9 years old when this came out, so it's in my wheelhouse.
I kind of liked it.
It's definitely not a masterpiece, although if you look at the poster, it is a very good Indiana Jones knockoff.
Chicken or the egg, man. Okay, yeah, sure. If you want to be a dick about it, yeah, you could say that this is a straight-up Indiana Jones ripoff. And you know what? You'd be right, okay? But I'm going to tell you something. If we're going to start laying down the cards here, let's just come up with this crystal clear fact. That any survivor with a nugget of pop culture savvy between their two ears are going to know this. That King Solomon's Mines predates Dr. Jones by 95 years.
Yeah, okay, 95 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay, let that sink in. And if anyone wants to cast any stones, why don't you go back to 54 with Charlton Heston.
You sound like you're mad.
I am. Well, no, it's not that. I mean, you're the one that's going to be defending this to me. But it's just sometimes I feel that sometimes they think that Indiana Jones, just like Star Wars, is considered to be just completely original. And they actually drew a lot of inspiration from a lot of stuff. Just go back to 54 with Charlton Heston's Secret of the Incas. Shit, why don't you just look at Prince's Uncle Scrooge? So if you want to put that in your pipe and smoke it at all you negative people out there.
Crack that whip. Okay. Philip. Calm down, man. Please. Yes, okay, it was a novel in 1885 by Sir H. Rider Haggard. Where was he from?
Is it Haggis?
I said it kind of. I thought I sounded a bit Scottish. No, not at all. H. Rider Haggard. And there was actually 2 previous film adaptations. So you can't deny that this film It strays a little further from the source material than the others. So it kind of exploited Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it apes every single scene.
Well, to me, Corey, this is what is to Raiders what Star Crash was to Star Wars.
All right, so you're talking rip-offs versus homages?
Homages. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, Raiders came after a lot of the source material that it kind of borrowed from, but I want you to be completely honest with yourself. You can admit that Raiders of the Lost Ark actually redefined the adventure genre. I'm never comfortable saying genre. How do you say it? Because you're half French.
Genre.
Genre? It's a lie. They don't say genre. They don't. Okay, it came after a lot of the things that inspired it, but ultimately, it redefined its genre. How do I say that again?
Genre.
Genre. Raiders absolutely set the El Dorado gold standard for adventure films, but there's also like these sub-genres within the adventure genre. So I'm so nervous saying that word now. I can't stop.
You're not saying vagina. Relax. Calm down.
Okay, so let's take a look at a map.
The Swashbuckler, the most rigidly conventionalized of all the subgenres. It's a descendant of the historical and romance fiction, so there'll be plenty of swords, fists, pits, and perils, and always takes place in the past. Historical. Could be based on reality or legend, but both feet are planted very well firmly in the real world. The Robinsonade, stranded from civilization, forced to live on wits. How quickly a taste of paradise can transform into a savage living hell. Man versus nature. Ah yes, of course, the quest. Quite simply, it's an expedition or trip to achieve a certain goal. Oh, the Lost World, an undiscovered part of the world that relies heavily on the suspension of disbelief. It's exotic as it is dangerous.
We need to figure out where King Solomon's Mines fits in all these categories.
The novel is actually considered to be the first of the Lost World subgenre. Okay, so it's considered to be one of the originals. So that's kind of done for us here. So that's the novel. But the movie, on the other hand, that's a different story, and we're going to get to that.
All of the adventure movies, kind of like what we're talking about today, in the vein of Raiders of the Lost Ark, are one of these five things now.
Looking at those titles, now you understand that why Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom are so different. What do you think Raiders of the Lost Ark is?
Raiders is certainly historical.
$1.
And where's Temple of Doom?
Swashbuckler, absolutely.
Congratulations.
What about Last Crusade?
Fuck Last Crusade.
Before we get into the plot of King Solomon's Mines, A, what is a King Solomon's Mines? And B, what is a King Solomon?
I got the answers written on my hand here. If you want to talk about King Solomon's right here, he's the first ruler of Israel. He set up the first temple in Jerusalem. And guess what that house, Corey? Guess what? The Ark of the Covenant. Do you have shivers right now?
Oh my gosh.
I'll tell you something else about King Solomon. That guy is pretty much known for his excessive wealth, his multiple wives, and first and foremost, his knowledge. So he's pretty much like Puff Daddy and Tommy Lee rolled into one.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Not only is he loved by the Jews, he's loved by the Muslims, and he's loved by the Christians. So we're talking about 10 levels of global adoration. His mines are basically where he buried his copper, his gold, and one of his treacherous wives. So that's a legend that was passed down. So that's what this film was kind of based on.
Knowing so much of this explains so much more of this movie to me now.
So that's what I mean. You always make fun of me when I get on and I want to talk about Canadian tax shelter films and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's going to explain this a hell of a lot more. Sorry, sometimes I gotta be Bert, okay? You be Ernie, I'll be Bert.
I couldn't understand why Sharon Stone was a white queen of this African tribe and she was buried inside a mountain in like crystal. I never knew that.
Oh man, what is King Solomon's Mines 1985 about? Well, it takes place in the 1900s. Our main hero is Alan Quatermain, who is essentially a tour guide slash implied big game safari hunter. He's hired by Jessie Houston because her father, the professor, goes missing on some sort of expedition down in Africa. He actually is the key to finding this legendary mine, but they're not the only ones that are in hot pursuit of him, because also we have a German officer, we also have an Arab slave trader, we got a giant spider, we have cannibal tribes, we got lava, we have even Mola Ram's sister makes a special guest appearance. So I'm going to tell you, stick around, you're going to enjoy this one.
Alright, let's get into the Tomb Raiders, or the main characters here in this movie. First we have the man, the myth, the legend, Alan Quatermain, played by Richard Chamberlain. I'm not sure what to say about him. Obviously Alan's a fortune hunter, a romantic, he's a comedian, and it's funny because Richard Chamberlain is a brilliant actor, and we all saw his turn as the hot as balls priest in Thornbirds.
Oh, hot as balls.
Or tell me how many housewives had a naughty little think session in the bathtub thinking about Father Ralph.
How hot was he?
He was so hot that he was not known as a comedian, actually, funny enough. But, so it seems weird that he was a fortune hunter all of a sudden, and he's got an addiction to very ill-timed quips, to say the least.
Slaves. For $100 you can own one for life.
$100? That's terrible.
You can always bargain.
Let's be honest, he's got some pretty off-moment jokes in this.
I think there's a lot of off moments through this entire film.
There is, but it's still charming, though. And you know what? He saves the day because he is the proverbial duck out of water, and he is the hero of this film, and there's no doubt that he's an amiable knockoff of Indiana Jones, without the wit or charisma.
Listen, all I'm going to say is, for a fish out of water, he seems pretty comfortable, pretty relaxed, and always in control. When I was watching this movie, talking about quips and, you know, like, not having a lot of faith in the main character, I was thinking of Big Trouble in Little China. I think of Kurt Russell's portrayal of Jack Russell. Now, there is a character that does it kind of right, because he is really he's a bumpkin. He's a bumbling fool through this. Chamberlain, as Alan Quatermain, he's having a good time.
Yeah, but he doesn't have that panache or that pedigree that Indy has. Indy what? How many languages did Indy speak? 30?
Probably.
His quips were well timed, but so were his fucking punches, and you know, he was everything, man. Not
to leap ahead, but he had George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Lawrence Kasdan behind them. Richard Chamberlain had Menachem and Golan. Okay, so don't bring up the word panache. Not quite yet.
All right, well, of course, that's the hero. Who's the lovely dame in this movie?
Ooh. Yes, Jessie Houston, played by the sultry Sharon Stone. I don't know if I entirely believe her in this film. I know that initially you can just tell that she was brought on to be the Karen Allen in this, the Marion Ravenwood. But I'm sure that when they were writing this film, they kind of saw Temple of Doom, because this is right off the heels, and they kind of like Kate Capshaw's Willie Scott, and I think they actually kind of like merged them together.
Was she a Playboy playmate?
She was, yeah, absolutely.
No.
She was in Playboy.
Seriously, when?
Seriously. I remember around Total Recall getting a Starlog and drooling, I mean absolutely lustful, over little censored clips of her in Playboy.
Oof. I didn't have that in St. John's. You were buying a lot of porno as a kid, eh?
No, but you'd find them on back of the old dumpsters. You know, you did what you did to survive. Porn in the wild.
I never knew this.
Jesus, didn't you see Basic Instinct? You wouldn't even need to see Playboy.
Oh, yeah, okay. I never knew that, that's all. Okay, so that's a little bit of, who did she play in this movie?
They wanted her to be like kind of the no-nonsense Jessie Houston. But pretty much through this whole film, all she offers up is just that, nonsense.
Well, I don't need to die with dignity! I want to scream!
Okay, she's screaming, she's the damsel in distress. Pretty much, Sharon Stone hated working on this film and the sequel. And just a little bit of facts here, just from the gossip rags here. This movie ended her first marriage.
Sweetheart, we're married.
Consider that a divorce.
And after this, she was so distraught and so worried about her career that she thought her only option was Police Academy 4.
And it was around part 4 when you started getting into the slums of the Police Academy movies.
Oh, absolutely. Even Gutenberg is like reevaluating. He's like, I am no longer America's sweetheart.
Alright, so that's Jessie Houston. Right after that, I think no discussion of this movie would be complete without Colonel Buckner, played by Herbert Lom.
How in the hell did they get Herbert Lom, by the way?
I'm not sure. I think it's because based on this performance, was he losing his mind around here? Because this character is out to lunch.
It's a pretty awkward take, for sure.
Like, he's ultra-violent in that he commits 2 mass killings in this movie. Several random deaths, but certainly they massacre several villages in this movie. Not him alone. He wasn't doing it, but he's doing it. But at the same time, they play this character for laughs.
Stop thinking, that's an order.
It's almost like you have a comedic take at a really evil Nazi. That's hard to pull off. And he doesn't do it.
What year does this movie take place in?
Oh, no. Well, back in 1885 or... Oh, you mean in the movie?
No, bitch, please. I'm not talking about now when it was filmed. I'm talking about when King Solomon's Mines, the story takes place.
1918 or something in this movie.
It's not Nazis.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, this is this is not Nazis.
Imbecile.
He's just World War I bad German.
Yeah, he's like the Kaiser, like in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, the second guy. You know what I mean? Everybody loves those guys.
But there's a lot of murder in this movie.
Sure, listen, and I can't remember what year this takes place, but if this is World War I, what odds? It's hilarious. If it's World War II...
Listen, his performance was so nuts in this movie that I loved it, of course. But he actually won a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor of the Year.
I remember being a child and reading in Fangoria that Maximum Overdrive got a Razzie, and I was completely devastated.
Okay, so he's basically like Major Tot in this, but the Major was scary and calm, a little bit geeky and eccentric, but he still went about his business. Colonel Buckner, well, it's no wonder that Germany lost that first big war too.
Good shot. Unfortunately, he was on our side.
That brings us into Degati, okay? Played by John Rhys Davies. I don't even know how to pronounce this.
I always like to pronounce it John Rhys Davies.
Well, that's actually fun. You know what? I actually heard that on TV one time. I heard John Rhys Davies, and for the longest time I was saying that. But of course, I was also one of those asshole kids that I actually said Tobey Hooper.
Oh gosh, I know. That is so brutal. I did that too.
73 Tobey Hooper classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And I'm always embarrassed to admit to be a Tobey Hooperer.
Oh my, it's all coming out now. Now I understand why you're not comfortable with the word genre. No, listen, this is completely an example of Jonesploitation, or Raidersploitation, whatever you want to call it, okay? He's the lovable Sala. In this movie, I guess, Rhys Davies wants to branch out and be an absolute heel. He's a slave trader. He's a bad guy.
You know what? John Rhys Davies, that face, he always looks like he's having fun.
He also looks like a nice guy. Like, even when he's machine gunning people down and the dead bodies are in quicksand and he's walking on their head, I keep on saying, oh my god, it's beautiful, Sala.
Alright, now, I want to talk about the character that I most remembered from this when I was a child, and that's Gagula, played by June Buthelezi. And I don't know, actually, I gotta be honest, I don't know if June Buthelezi was in anything else, but a really old witch doctor trying to hang on to power in this village, and for some reason, to hang on to power, has to sacrifice Jesse Houston inside a volcano for some reason. I wasn't clear.
She scared the living hell out of me. When I first saw this as a kid, do you know who I thought she was?
Who?
I thought it was actually Louis Gossett Jr.
Ooh, if Louis Gossett survived the apocalypse and he hears that you think he was like Gagula, he's gonna come find you.
Well, no, Gagula is actually the love child between Louis Gossett Jr. and, what's her name from Vamp? Come on, that actress. Jesus.
You know what? Can I tell you about a brilliant business idea I had, actually?
What's that?
Because, you know, lots of times you have a conversation just like that, and you say, oh, who was the person in that movie, and what was that guy? If only you could look that up on a device, like, you know, like, I don't know, a space telephone. But I had an idea, and what it's called is the Encyclopedia Line.
Got questions?
Would that work for songs too? So if I called up and I was like, you know, it's like,
absolutely. And it's in a giant call center in India somewhere. And what they do is they all have books and encyclopedias. They're all becoming very good at things.
We got answers.
And they just hit a button and it's like, hello? And then someone in that giant room knows the answer because they have lots of books and stuff.
Knows the next lyric or who wrote it, and
absolutely everything.
I'll invest in that.
Don't invest now because there's no one going to call it. This phone never rings.
Every now and then you find yourself just picking it up and say hello.
Oh, you know what? I phone every morning to remind people to return their late movies.
God damn, that's... Oh, wow.
It's our policy.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Everybody handles their own different nervous breakdowns differently.
Do you want to hear how I have to answer the phone?
Yeah, I would.
If the phone rings, I need to say, hello, thank you for calling Mega Hit Video, where you can pre-own your very own copy of Jurassic Park for only $19.99. My name is Corey. How can I help you?
Well, allow me to do how we do it, okay? Cliff's Video. Yeah. No, we don't got it. I want you to check out Mega Hit. That's how it's done. Okay, that's the advantage of being a tax write-off business. I can't conclude this thing right now without bringing up Umpopo. Umpopo, or whatever you want to call him, based on the end credits or the actual book. But either way, he turns out to be the hero of this film. Alan Quartermain and everybody else would be long dead if it wasn't for him. He turns out to be the tribal king, and that turned out to be a bit of a shocker. But see, this harkens back to what I was talking about with Big Trouble in Little China. Because, like Big Trouble, Dennis Dunn is actually the hero, the American, the Asian American. Whereas Kurt Russell is the guy that they're marketing towards, but he is the bumbling idiot. Alan Quartermain, same sort of thing going on. He's stumbling, he's the fish out of water, and who turns out to be the hero? Well, the tribal king. So there is a sense of some form of cultural awareness going on, but, you know, crude, albeit. 10-year-old boys, get the hell out of here. Because guess what? There is going to be romance in this, okay? Whether you like it or not, as a descendant of historical romance, it's going to be there. But I think one of the major differences between Indiana Jones and Alan Quartermain is the fact that Indiana Jones treats sex and romance like another conquest. I know that sounds kind of awful, but it's kind of real. And if you're an old softy, maybe you'll like Alan Quartermain, because I'm telling you now, right off the bat, he really gives his heart and soul to Sharon Stone and her hairdo right away.
Very early in. Very early in.
Very early in, and I find that kind of funny, especially coming from a man's man like Richard Chamberlain.
I think the chemistry is a little lacking between these two. But you know what isn't lacking?
Tell me.
The racism, my friend. Okay, I don't want to call it racism. Let's call it an accurate display of cultural chauvinism.
Cultural chauvinism? Ooh.
I don't know if I'm using that properly, to be honest, but lots of films in the adventure category look at native peoples with a slightly backward glance. But this is based on an old novel from the late 1800s. It's not like everybody was running around burning bras and women were voting and everyone wasn't racist. So, you know, for instance, let's look at when they try and cook Alan and Jesse in a giant pot of soup. It kind of fits, right? It kind of fits. And you know what? At that time, maybe people did think that African tribes ate people. I didn't read that book, but that might make sense. So what I'm saying is this is displaying something that actually is quite normal. It's not a racist movie. It's displaying racism.
Where is her father, you towel-headed creep?
I do not know, I swear.
Philip, you have
said,
you've said these names a couple of times, so I think it's time that I make sure we discuss Menahem, Golan, and Yoram Globus.
Menachem.
All right. Okay, I'm just going to stick with Golan Globus for now. Speaking of Golan Globus, it's time to look at our buried treasures. You mentioned low budget. This movie actually only had a budget of about $12 million. Now, that's not chump change by any stretch of the imagination, but it was also the budget that paid for the simultaneously shot sequel, The Lost City of Gold. So it was actually two films for $12 million. And that's not a lot of money. If one company created more low-budget, awesome, highly successful movies, you name it other than Golden Globus, I have yet to hear. Tell me.
I think what makes Canon Pictures dangerous to not only the film industry, developing minds, and in the end, themselves, was that Canon wasn't just a production company, it's a philosophy. It's really an aesthetic at the end of the day. Less is more? Fuck you. More is more. Menachem and Golan were hated by Hollywood. Hollywood thought that they were too tacky, they thought they were excessive, and they just saw them as two Israeli cousin outsiders. And it didn't really help the fact that these guys surrounded themselves with an Israeli crew. It didn't do much to integrate them into the Hollywood system. I remember reading an article one time, and this guy kind of nailed it right on the head. He said that Menachem and Golan spoke English, but they didn't understand the American idiom. And I didn't really understand that at first, but when I let that sink in and thought about the genres and just the craziness of it, it did make sense at the very end. And as a result, say what you want about those guys and some of the questionable films that they put out, you cannot say that they did not deliver the goods.
Delta Force is such a flagrant attempt to celebrate irrational racial hostility. I think you're bound to be at least slightly sickened by it.
Menachem.
While you speak Hebrew here, can we talk music?
Okay, Jerry Goldsmith, what do you want to know?
The soundtrack was actually one of the best parts of this movie. Goldsmith's score is as poker-faced as anything else you're going to get in this film. This is the age of low-budget synth scores. Goldsmith, man, he pulls it out and slaps it on the table. He goes full orchestral, and what he essentially does, he's pouring perfume on a pig. But it was his fourth collaboration with J. Lee Thompson. I don't know if they went to high school together or what, but that brings us to, actually, J. Lee Thompson. What do you know about good old J. Lee?
J. Lee was pretty long in the tooth at this particular point. And I always associate him with Charles Bronson. And, he and Charles Bronson were a long way from their United and Paramount Pictures deals at this particular point when they associated and got in bed with the Canon Group. That's not to say that the body of work that they put out wasn't amazing. St. Ives is an absolute classic. 10 to Midnight. Okay. Now you're going to laugh at me. Death Wish 4.
Oh, man. Charles Bronson was a tough old dude. Do you remember when he was young?
Charles Bronson was never young. But he was from that era of big dick, barrel-chested man like Telly Savalas. You know what I mean? Who else? Who we think of along those lines?
I don't know, but I never ever thought I would ever, at the end of the world, sit around and have a discussion about Telly Savalas' dick.
Loves you, baby.
But what about Lee Marvin? You know Lee Marvin's got a huge joint on him.
Absolutely.
And then you go Richard Chamberlain.
Do you think this would have been a better movie with Charles Bronson?
I tell you, that makes me think of Escape from New York. Do you know that Escape from New York was actually supposed to star Charles Bronson?
Really?
Shit you not. He was also in Playboy.
Who was in Playboy?
Sharon Stone.
Oh yeah, Sharon Stone. I thought you said Charles Bronson. I'm sorry.
I did. I was trying to make a circular joke. You fucked up the bit.
Oh, I guess it's very funny. But I actually didn't know it was a joke. I was like, Charles Bronson was...
Aha, very funny.
Can you imagine the shock on all the subscribers' faces when they opened up their Playboy and in the centerfold was Charles Bronson, like, fully splayed.
Okay, so we're at this magical point now where we got no choice but to talk about money, box office. So how did King Solomon's Mines in 1985 fare?
It actually fared okay. It made about 15 million bucks total, which is not too bad. The budget was 12 million, but bear in mind the budget was for 2 movies. They shot King Solomon's Mines and Alan Quartermain and the Lost City of Gold back to back. So it actually made some decent bank. Not a runaway hit, but certainly not a failure.
Now, I understand that there was supposed to be a third one in the works. Were they supposed to film this simultaneously after that, or was there supposed to be a break and then this would be released in probably 87, 88?
Yeah, the plan was to take a couple of years of a break after Lost City of Gold and then come out with a brand new one. But we all know at this point Sharon Stone probably wasn't going to sign up for it, but they could have replaced her easily. So yeah, they were going to have a third one, but The Lost City of Gold, critically panned. Nobody was really calling for a third Alan Quartermain movie.
Okay, so you said it did moderately well, but in November 22nd, 1985, it really didn't have a lot of competition when it opened up.
No, absolutely not. It actually had a relatively clear schedule. The only one that pops to mind for me would be White Knights, Mikhail Baryshnikov and Gregory Hines.
Did you want to go see that as a kid?
White Knights! Oh my gosh, that was a nightmare. If my mother had said, get in the car, we're going to see White Knights, I would have rolled out of the car on the way to the cinema to get away.
I remember my mother took me to go see Legal Eagles. I was so excited because it was directed by Ivan Reitman, the director of Ghostbusters, and I was horrified. I was like, when did the Ghostbusters go show up? So we got One Magic Christmas. You ever hear of that?
One Magic Christmas. Who was in One Magic Christmas? I feel like I really know that, but it's kind of hard to separate all those Christmas pictures.
Well, actually, because the week after that, Santa Claus the movie came out with John Lithgow and Dudley Moore. Now, you definitely remember that.
Okay, that, yes, classic.
We had Bad Medicine with Steve Guttenberg. I can't even remember that as a VHS.
No, I don't either. Was this would have been before Police Academy?
No, this is well after. Like we said, the honeymoon with Steve Guttenberg was over.
Right. It's too bad, you know, because he was so fucking charming.
He was, but you know what? You do Can't Stop the Music, that musical with the Village People who were well long in the tooth at that point, and everyone turned. It soured.
You think the Village People turned the world against Steve Guttenberg?
Listen, man, he was awesome in The Boys of Brazil and a lot of these movies. He had a lot going for him. But you
know, I just want to highlight what you just said. You directly blame the Village People for the downward trajectory of Steve Guttenberg's career.
My time is now!
I said it, I'm going to stand by it, and I live it for the end of time.
That is a heavy legacy to plant at the feet of the cowboy.
It is the end of time, so no big deal.
Leatherman is walking around out there in his chaps, and he's like, God damn it, the world has ended, but I still feel guilty about Stevie G.
Jesus Christ.
What else we got going on? Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin. Do you remember anything about that?
No, I have no idea what that is. I don't have it in the store. I'm sure of that.
No, I don't think anybody did. I think it was a Japanese production. It was an animation film, but it had high hopes. Well, like they all did. But no, this went nowhere. I have no recollection. There was no breakfast cereal, no tie-in combo, not a thing.
Well, now, if it was a Japanese cartoon, it probably had Nazis and dildos in it, so...
Tentacle rapes. No, I tell you what movie came out the next week, which pretty much, for King Solomon's Mines, might as well had tentacle rape. And what was it, Corey?
Na 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 na. Ow! Rocky 4. Oh my God. And listen, let's be honest. There was never a movie made that made America stand on a chair, pull down its pants, and lay down its big giant American than Rocky 4.
Rocky 4 needs to be celebrated because it did actually end the Cold War.
Absolutely. I know. It directly ended the Cold War. It is an amazing piece of propaganda, and I know Gorbachev was quaking in his boots. If Drago can't save your nation, you're going to throw in the towel.
I have a theory that he is actually a robot in this film.
Whoa, you know what? That would be a great back-end movie.
I really do believe if you look at this film, he's hooked up to a lot of machines. There's like some $6 million man stuff going on here. Just go back and rewatch Rocky 4. I know that's kind of blasphemous now that we're here to celebrate King Solomon's Mines. But when you're done with this, go back and watch it and you're going to see that Stallone had to face a robot in this film.
And you know what? Now that I think about it, Ivan Drago, he doesn't have nipples in that movie. Remember?
Listen, that's what pretty much I was hell-bent on his nipples in that film. That's the business side of it. We've got that taken care of. That leaves us with one horrible thing that we have to do now. We have to be judge, jury, and executioner. Should this film be saved, Corey?
Philip, I dare not address this situation in any fashion until I put back on my uniform.
All right, good point, Corey. All right, here we are. At the end of the day, what are we doing with this film?
You mean, are we going to relegate it to the dustbin of history to be forgotten for all time? Or are we going to attempt to save it so future generations can know about its awesomeness?
Okay, well that's pretty obvious. We're pretty easy sells here when it comes to a lot of this stuff here. But for devil's advocate, okay, why should I go along with you on this adventure? Because it's not the greatest movie in the world. We both can agree on that.
No, it's not the greatest movie in the world, but okay, first and foremost, it does clearly fall into several of those Indiana Jones categories that we talked about.
Okay, so we said that we were going to do it. The book was kind of the origins or the source of inspiration for The Lost World. Now we know King Solomon's Mines 85 strays from that, but where does it fit in for our little adventure categories?
Okay, well, it's definitely a historical movie, right? Takes place in the past. It's definitely a quest movie. They're looking for something.
Yeah, okay.
Little do they know that they're looking for a white queen of Africa buried inside a mountain inside a giant diamond, but still, they're on a quest.
So, it's a historical quest then?
Okay, yes, at its bare minimum, it is a historical quest. I gotta tell you, your tone sounds very unenthused, my friend. There's so much more to this movie. You need to build it up.
I'm not saying that. I've just told you I'm playing devil's advocate here.
You sound like a half-drunk divorcee talking about her ex-husband. Okay, absolutely. So, we know it's a historical quest. We know it's not a great movie. But if you take it at face value, in terms of being a great example of Jonesploitation, I cannot think of a better example. It is Raiders and Temple of Doom smushed together in every way. So, as Jonesploitation, it must be preserved.
I will say, too, that even though I told you know my feelings on Last Crusade, I find Last Crusade borrowed an awful lot from this one. There are little elements of this that that were kind of slipped into Last Crusade, whether you agree with that or not.
So now you're making the argument that Last Crusade is quarter exploitation?
Chicken or the egg laid the chicken, and now we got eggs again.
So, you would most definitely, and we've talked about this for hours on end in the past, you would definitely save King Solomon's Mines from 1985 as opposed to The Last Crusade.
Oh my God, in a heartbeat.
I think that in and of itself is enough to preserve this movie forever.
I tell you one thing though. One thing that I'm really happy that we're not talking about here right now is going into the darker elements of this film where we're going to start getting all cerebral, like, oh, the blatant Victorian racial insensitivity. Okay, that's there, but if we're going to start doing that with a lot of the movies we love, especially 70s and 80s, what are we going to be left with in our shops, Corey?
Oh my god, The Secret of Nim? I mean, I don't know.
So basically what I'm going to say here, I'm going to try to be a little bit more positive here. If this film is guilty of anything besides minor plagiarism, I'm going to say that it's guilty of having a good time all the time.
Well then, there's no debate. We're going to save this movie forever. Why don't you grab that leathery whip firmly in your hand, hoist it high, and get ready to salute King Solomon.
Hold on. You hear that?
I do hear that. What is it?
Hello?
My name is Hugo. You are not the only survivors. And also, your show is pure shit.
Sky's falling, the world is ending, and I'm rewinding these videotapes. No one's renting cause they're all dying, and I'm finding this hard to take. Stay inside, but time passes slowly. Save pop culture one film at a time. So when this madness is finally over, I can serve the next person in line. Can't stop working cause that leads to thinking I'm gonna catch this deadly disease. I got one friend who always reminds me that it's life after late fees. After late fees, it's life after